that is actually oxygen carbon dioxide transport, is called as respiration. So chronic respiratory failure means either the ventilatory pump must have failed, reach to respiratory failure, or any other systemic problem can lead to respiratory failure. Here the respiratory Here the respiratory failure means exactly there is a problem of cellular metabolism. The cell is getting metabolized by oxygen and carbon dioxide transport. When there is a problem in carbon dioxide transport in between the cells, and this results in chronic respiratory failure. So how to do the non-pharmacological management? Normally pharmacological management we used to do with the medicine. How we can do a non-pharmacological management? So first of all, I would like to explain about the respiratory physiology. The respiratory system consists of two parts, lungs and respiratory pump. The lung is meant for gas exchange organ. It's especially a chemical perspective. Already explained that the alveoli is exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide. What is the respiratory pump or ventilatory pump? It is a mechanical perspective. So the respiratory physiology is combination of chemical perspective and mechanical perspective. The chemical perspective is respiration, mechanical perspective is breathing. So now I think you will understand what is the difference between breathing and respiration. The breathing results in respiration. The breathing results in respiration. Further, the respiration enhances the breathing. So that's an ideal part. So let us talk about the respiratory pump mechanical perspective. That means the chest wall, diaphragm, and lungs. Let us see. So you can see here how it works. So movement of chest and abdomen alter the central pressure during inspiration and expiration. So you see here exactly, this is actually a movement of chest. The chest and abdomen alter the central pressure during inspiration and expiration. During inspiration, decrease in intrathoracic pressure, draw the air into the lungs and blood into the right atrium. Look at here, during the inspiration, what is happening? Intrathoracic pressure is negative. So it is pulling the air inside, so it gets inflated. It is inflating now. During the inflation, you look at here, the blood is also returned to the right atrium. It's a beautiful picture. During expiration, intrathoracic pressure rise, the air force out of the lung. So during the because of the pressure, you look at here during the expiration. Now it is in inspiration. Now in expiration, intrathoracic pressure rise, air force out. Look at this diagram. That is actually here. I have given this venous return as well as the end of inspiration and expiration. During inspiration, intrathoracic pressure is negative, whereas in expiration, the intrathoracic pressure is positive. And same way, if you see the venous return, what is happening? The venous return is increasing during inspiration and it is decreasing during expiration. So it's a beautiful combo of venous return as well as the mechanical perspective of the lung. So the contraction of diaphragm compress the abdominal activity, squeeze the blood vessel to push the blood through. Look at here, the contraction of diaphragm. So this is basically a diaphragm. So when the contraction of diaphragm happens, so here the contraction means the diaphragm is basically pushing down, it's going down. So when it is pushed down, what happens means it squeezes the blood and push through the during relaxation phase of diaphragm. It decreases the pressure in the abdominal cavity. It draws the blood into the vessels like abdomen. You just think of during relaxation phase of diaphragm is like a ink filler. When you are using a ink filler, when you just suck it, what happens? It pulls the capillary action up. So similarly, the relaxation of diaphragm decreases the pressure in the abdominal cavity, draw the blood into the vessels into the abdomen. So basically, you can understand one thing. The diaphragm contraction, that means during inspiration, it squeezes the blood and vessels blood through up and cavity, and relaxation of diaphragm increase the blood in the abdominal cavity and draw the blood into the blood vessels to the abdomen. So basically the relaxation is a phase where the blood draw into the vessels of abdomen. So abdominal aorta get the blood during relaxation. That is actually the diaphragm getting decreases the blood flow into the abdominal cavity. Yeah. So the respiratory pump central control. So we can see the respiratory pump central control. It is basically medulla and pons, which is controlling the respiratory pump central control is controlled by medulla and pons. So there is other control, specifically phrenic nerve control, but here I am going to talk only the respiratory central control, which is called pneumotoxic center or acoustic center, which is in the pontine respiratory group, the dorsal respiratory group, the ventral respiratory group, and medulla. These are all the areas in the pons. So the C3 is a very important prospective area of respiratory pump mechanism up to C3. And muscles of inspiration or expiration. You see the muscles of inspiration, the arrow graph which is going up. That is actually, these are all the accessory muscles, sternocleidomastoid, scalene, and basically the muscles which is doing expiration, the muscles which is doing expiration are showing the arrow mark down. That is internal intercostal, external oblique, internal oblique, and transverse abdominis. So basically, abdominal muscles are expiratory pump. You should not forget. Abdominal muscles are expiratory pump, whereas the external intercostal and diaphragm is an inspiratory pump. Okay, let us see the inspiration muscles of diaphragm. The prime mover of respiration attached to the inferior surface of the lungs, and the diaphragm contract and flatten. See, you look at the picture, contract and flatten. While contraction, it is relaxation, and it is relax, it is breathing basically. So the curved nature of the diaphragm is basically expiration, whereas the flattened nature is basically a inspiration. So the diaphragm contract, it flatten and pull the bottom of the lung downwards and expanding them and enlarge the volume of the thoracic cavity. The controlled by respiratory center via phrenic nerve. So the phrenic nerve is a kind of a behavior of motor and sensory nerve, which is from the ventral rami of C1, C2, C3, which is directly connected. On the way, it is connected to the branches to scalene as well as the sternocleidomastoid, and it is directly attached to your diaphragm, both right and left side. So the diaphragm motor function and sensory function, even though the pericardium motor and sensory function is specifically performed by phrenic nerve, which is a ventral rami of C1, C2, C3. So external intercostal muscle between the ribs contract and rise the ribs and elevate the sternum stiffness of thoracic cage during respiratory and prevent it from curving inward. So external intercostal muscles between the ribs rise the ribs up. It elevates the ribs up. When the diaphragm descends, it contributes enlargement of contraction of the thoracic cage. So when there is a diaphragm is going down, it enlarge the contraction of thoracic cage. So normally, when during the inspiration, what is happening is the diaphragm go for flatten. At the same time, the ribs are getting spreaded. At the same time, the lateral expansion of the chest has increased. This is normally three-dimensional way. That is actually it is working on all frontal plane, horizontal plane, as well as the frontal plane, vertical plane, as well as it is opening in the lateral plane. So sagittal plane. So all three planes it is functioning. So that's why it is called three-dimensional movement. Diaphragm is. It is inspiration. So when you see the exhalation, it is a passive process normally. Actually, when you are doing nothing, the elastic recoiling of alveoli is going to give you the exhalation. It becomes active during forceful breathing. But when you do a forceful breathing, suppose you are going for a spirometry work or you are going for assessment of spirometer, or sometimes when you are going to blow the flute or you are going to blow some organs, all these things are forceful breathing, where here the abdominal muscles is also taking part. Example, expiration is active when playing wind instrument or during exercise. During forced expiration, the anterior abdominal muscle and the internal intercostal muscle contract, increase the pressure in the abdominal wall to pull the thorax, and from the thorax it pull it out kind of. So what I am saying means the primary or passive process, it become an active during forceful breathing. Example, the expiration is active when playing wind instrument or during expiration. So here what is a question means, here only we are having a question of whether we are doing a spirometry workout, the spirometry workout or a spirogram we are taking for assessment, how far it is going to helpful, because in that we are not going to read the normal expiratory process. There we are going to study the forceful expiratory process. So it is actually going to show the strength of your expiratory muscle, but not it is going to show the condition of the alveoli, how it is. So that is a question over here, which is I'm contradicting with the spirometry test. If you take an inhalation is concerned, the diaphragm is the primary muscles of inspiration and accessory muscles of inspiration including scalene, sternocleidomastoid. This accessory denotes the muscles are supposed to assist with breathing, not to overtaking breathing. See, when suppose an athlete is doing a 100-meter dash, is going very fast. So at that time, after completing that 100-meter dash, so once he become breathless, actually oxygen depth start to work. So what will happen means he need extra muscle to breathe for some time to come to a homeostasis. So that extra work will be done during particular time only. This scalene and sternocleidomastoid will take part in it. Otherwise, it is actually working in the stability part of your scapula as well as your cervical spine. Otherwise, it is actually going to give a stability of the musculature around the neck, which is not at all directly going to involve in your respiratory muscles in a respiratory action. So it is a dual muscle. It is going to work in both respiration as well as postural. Normally, it is a postural muscle. When there is a demand is required for a temporary means of post sports or something like that, for the temporary means, it can act as a breathing muscle. But in case of COPD patient or chronic respiratory failure patient, these muscles will work as a major muscles to take over the breath always. So this shows the respiratory fatigue syndrome of upper respiratory muscles. So specifically this muscles, if you see some patient like COPD, you will see the very heavy tire or cord-like structure you can see. So breathing and nervous system. The control of breathing is balanced between central nervous system, that is brain and spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, somatic nervous system, and autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system consists of sympathetic and parasympathetic, as well as there is a system called enteric nervous system. The parasympathetic activity is associated with relaxation response, and sympathetic activity is response to heightened response. Suppose, for example, if a patient is doing a yoga or doing meditation, so there the parasympathetic activity happens, and where is a pause should be more. The expiration is a long expiration, so that is a parasympathetic activity happens. Whereas a person is running for a 100-meter dash, or a person is doing a heavy work kind of a running aerobic workout. So after aerobic workout or sprinters, they will have a breathlessness. During the time, the sympathetic activity will be highlighted. So breathing and nervous system, the slow diaphragmatic breathing with a prolonged expiration will increase the parasympathetic activity, result in relaxation. That's the reason in case of yoga, if you are going to say long om, so what is going to happen means it's a prolonged expiration. So where the parasympathetic activity start take place. The rapid chest breathing with a prolonged inhalation will increase the sympathetic activity. Suppose you are going to do a rapid shallow breathing after any aerobic activity to attain the homeostasis of oxygen depth. So there the result is stress response happens. Suppose a dog is just behind you, you are running against a dog is just back and you are just running fast. So actually it will create a sympathetic activity. So sympathetic overactivity results in upregulation. The upregulation is negatively alter our breath pattern and change the respiratory muscle we recruit for breathing. Normally, the respiratory muscle has to be recruited is your diaphragm and abdominal muscles and your intercostal muscles. But due to upregulation, to equalize the oxygen depth, to achieve homeostasis, you will change the respiratory muscles. Normally, you will start to work with the accessory muscles of respiration. It can alter the motor control pattern and result in musculoskeletal pain. When you start to use more amount of muscles kind of this, so what will happen? When you start to use more of kind of what you call it as accessory muscles of musculoskeletal pain. Okay, let us see what is sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system in a short. The sympathetic nervous system means irritability, anxiety, fatigue, depression, muscle tension, high blood pressure. This is very common during this COVID stress phase, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system activate relaxation response, visualize positive healing image, breathe, and progressive relaxation and meditation. That's why the OM, if you are going to call a long expiration, is going to help you in your healing process as well as it is going to create a progressive relaxation and breathing. So, why physiotherapists worried about breathing? If breathing is not normalized, no other movement pattern can be. It is by correlate. And breathing is a fuel for movement. Any movement is done that is because of breathing. Dysfunction of breathing can feed functional impairment and vice versa. So any dysfunctional pattern of breathing can lead to functional impairment. So whatever pain or disease, everything is based on your dysfunctional pattern of breathing. The breathing pattern disorders impairing the motor control and compromising the trunk stability. And breathing is essential for posture and core stability. Actually, your diaphragm is actually a postural muscle as well as it is a breathing muscle. Because if diaphragm normally when you are rest, it acts as a breathing muscle. But when you want to stabilize your core for certain odd events or unaccustomed activity, so the diaphragm is going to, and the core stability muscle is going to start, abdominal muscles are going to start to work for stabilize the core and not for your breathing. So that's why if you are going to do unaccustomed activity where the stability is a problem, you will get lot of breathlessness because there is oxygen depth happens. So the dual role of diaphragm. In childhood, the diaphragm acts as a primary respiratory muscle. In 6 months, the diaphragm takes a dual role as a respiratory muscle and postural muscle. As soon as child is born, if you see, the child is going to lie down. It is not going to stand or walk. For first 6 months, it is a motor activities maximum is rolling, rolling side to side. When it start to creep or crawl, the postural muscle, the diaphragm is going to start to function as both respiratory muscle and postural muscle. Up to first 6 months, it is going to use only as a muscles of respiration. The dual role intact in order to achieve lumbopelvic stability and optimal movement pattern. So normally optimal movement pattern and lumbopelvic stability. When child start to walk for a toddler walk, that means it shows that the diaphragm take a dual role. It acts as both respiratory muscle and postural muscle. The dual role of abdominal pressure. So this is actually everybody talking core, 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 core. Actual, the original core is nothing but it is a relation between diaphragm and abdominal muscles. There is a space in between. It is called core basically. So intra-abdominal pressure can be maintained well. That means you have a wonderful core. So the very, very, very important part of your core is your transverse abdominis, multifidus, pelvic floor muscles provide support to the spine. So the breathing demands increase the competition between stomach area. The diaphragm has to work more. So basically it is a dual role. So diaphragm, so basically when breathing demand increases, the diaphragm lose as a role of functionally as a stability muscle, core stability muscle. It starts to work as a functionally as a breathing muscle because it is majorly stakeholder of a breathing muscle. Breathing will always win the competition. After all, we need it to live. As a result, diaphragm contribution to the postural stability declines. So basically, it is a dual role. So diaphragm, whenever there is a postural demand, diaphragm will work for a postural demand. When you will lose your core stability. So this is a good core. So in the good core, if you see the upper part is nothing but your diaphragm and lower part is a pelvic floor. This is transverse abdominis. And these three are going to contribute to your core stability. So when there is a no air inside and there is actually a improper air inside or it is just shape is changed. So it is actually a weak core. So weak core or good core is based on diaphragm, not on other muscles. So other muscles are supporting structures. So we have a myth still in the fitness centers that core means they are muscles of abdomen, but actually the real core is your diaphragm. So no amount of glute core strengthening can substitute for lack of diaphragmatic activity. So again, I want to say this is a big myth I am bursting that no amount of glute or core muscle can substitute the lack of diaphragmatic activity because the lack of diaphragmatic activity, even though you have a very good glute or you have a very good strength of your abdominal muscles, you could have a six pack even though you have don't have a good diaphragmatic activity. Then even though you have don't have a good diaphragmatic activity, then even though you are considered as a weak core. So what is respiratory failure? The lung disease, skeletal disorder, a neuromuscular disorder. Any of this disorder leads to reduction in function of lungs. The lung function will go down. So this results in impaired gas exchange. So gas exchange will get impaired. So drop in oxygen level and blood with or without increase in CO2 level. So normally body का ऑक्सीजन लेवल कम हो जाता है and the CO2 level बढ़ जाता है. So any kind of respiratory failure is happen due to lung disease, skeletal disease or neuromuscular disorder. Let us talk about respiratory failure. It is acute or chronic or acute on chronic. So acute means sudden respiratory failure. Chronic means since many days the patient is having a respiratory failure, and acute on chronic means it's a major cause of mortality and morbidity rate increased with the age and presence of comorbidities. So comorbidity means right now. Excuse me. So acute means a sudden disease, suppose a status asthmaticus. Chronic means COPD. Acute on chronic means a patient already having a compromised lung. For example, the patient have a asthma or patient have a interstitial lung disease or anything. Along with that comorbidity, you have acute attack. Suppose, for example, the acute attack may happen because of corona. So these are all the reasons for respiratory failure. The acute respiratory failure means it develops over a minute to hour. Within an hour, acute respiratory failure can develop. Whereas chronic respiratory failure takes days or months. And acute respiratory failure, pH will go for down. That means it become acidity below 7.2. Whereas in chronic respiratory failure, the bicarbonate, that is a compensation, is increases, pH is slightly gone down. This is example is pneumonia, acute respiratory failure. Suppose the patient is admitted in ICU, you must be seeing a day before or 2 days before he must be normal. Suddenly the patient lungs will go for collapse and he will get for pneumonia. Suddenly pH fall below 7.2, become acidic, and this is a case of pneumonia, that is acute respiratory failure. In case of chronic respiratory failure, polycythemia, cor pulmonale, it is a slowly adaptive process like COPD. The classification of respiratory failure. There are four type of, depends on pathophysiology of mechanical dearrangement. Type 1 is a hypoxemic, and type 2 is hypercapnic, type 3 and type 4 respiratory failure. There are four respiratory failures. Okay, let us see the respiratory system. The lungs, there is a pulmonary failure, that is PaO2 will go down and PCO2 will go down, hypoxic respiratory failure. What is hypercapnic respiratory failure? That is type 2 respiratory failure means the respiratory pump, that is a ventilatory failure, PaO2 go down, PCO2 go up. So what is a type 1 and type 2 means? Type 1 is V by Q mismatch will occurs at the pulmonary level. Whereas type 2 is loss of CNS drive or impaired neuromuscular competence like GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome, or muscle weakness, fracture of rib, or there is a spinal cord injury, like that type 2 respiratory failure. So type 1 respiratory failure is collapse of alveolar units. The supplemental oxygen is required for type 1. Whereas in type 2 actually, PaCO2 is more than 50 mmHg, excessive dead space will be there, increased mechanical loading. So there we have to improve the mechanical, we have to give a mechanical assistance. So type 2, the ventilator is required. Whereas in type 1, even BiPAP can help you. BiPAP means it is a non-invasive ventilator can work out. So type 3 and type 4 respiratory failure. Type 3 respiratory failure is perioperative period of reduced functional residual capacity or atelectasis. The lung collapse is a type 3 respiratory failure, which where the normally physiotherapists come across in ICU. Type 4 respiratory failure is hyperfusion, that is a cardiogenic shock or septic shock or hypovolemic shock. It is a very heavy kind of respiratory failure. So what are the respiratory failure symptoms? Dyspnea, difficulty in breathing, tachypnea, and restlessness. Tachypnea means the respiratory rate must have increased. Restlessness, confusion, anxiety, cyanosis, central tachycardia, increased heart rate, pulmonary hypertension, loss of consciousness. So all these things, if you see, these all are sympathetic overactivity. So the management, how we can manage the respiratory management, respiratory failure management. Patent airway. We have to find out whether the airway is patent, oxygenation is adequate, respiratory support is proper, non-invasive respiratory support, that is BiPAP, and invasive respiratory support, that is ventilator, and the major part is physiotherapy management. Okay. The first and most is positioning. The positioning helps to improve the ventilation perfusion matching and promote the mucociliary clearance and improving the aeration, reduce the work of breathing. So what are the position we can prefer? Prone lying, side lying, semi-recumbent, and upright. Next, our gravity is a god for us in case of ICU. If you want to treat any respiratory patient, because the effect of gravity on the blood are important. Blood has a weight, so naturally flow towards a dependent area of the body. So the proper positioning will help you to flow of blood to the dependent area of the body. So when you position, the gravity will help you. The prone is very, very important position in case of V by Q matching, because the redistribution of edema and increased functional residual capacity in patient and acute respiratory distress syndrome, especially in ARDS. It shows the result is oxygenation of 52 to 92% of the patients with severe acute respiratory failure. So at last, you cannot do anything with ARDS. Last, you can do the prone lying, and the prone lying, you need lot of physiotherapy assistance to position the patient. With that, if you start to ventilate the patient will have 92% chances of preventing the respiratory failure, and it can help in the respiratory failure 92%. The air move towards diaphragm while the blood gravitates to anterior dependent lungs of the field. The side laying affect the lungs uppermost to improve the aeration through the increased lung volume in the patient unilateral lung disease. Air move towards the diaphragm while blood gravitate a lateral dependent lung. So basically you can see more blood over here, whereas the air is on the opposite side, you can see. SEMI recommend 45-degree head up position serves to prevent the risk of gastroesophageal reflux and aspiration. So post aspiration, post feeding, rice tube feeding, if the patient is not having a very good swallowing capacity, so make a patient in semi-recumbent position, which is a 45-degree. It can prevent the gastroesophageal reflex at the cardiac sphincter and also the aspiration. The upright, again, it helps you to improve the apical lobes. And the manual diaphragm release, MDRT, manual diaphragm release technique, improve the diaphragmatic mobility. This is a new one I'm going to teach you. The inspiratory capacity and expiratory capacity in people with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So MDRT. What is MDRT? The reduction of diaphragmatic motion is a major risk factor for increased mortality in people with COPD. Especially in COPD, patients start to use lot of anteroposterior part of the thoracic cage breathing, and their thoracic cage has changed its shape like a barrel chest. So because of that, what is happening is air is getting trapped inside, hyperinflation of lungs happen, the diaphragm muscle fibers become more transversely oriented to the zone of opposition. So that means it won't contract properly, it won't relax properly. If diaphragm is not relaxing, curving up fully, it is not going to efficiently work as a contracted fiber. It is not going to flatten fully. So usually lie vertically. So the diaphragm contract less effective expanding the lower rib cage. So the lateral expansion of rib cage will be low because the diaphragm is not contracting or expanding efficiently. Decrease in transverse diameter during inspiration, diaphragm reduction in number of sarcomeres, that is called a diaphragm wasting. Anybody heard about diaphragm wasting? It is very interesting in COPD, in a chronic respiratory failure patient. Diaphragm reduction in the number of sarcomere, diaphragmatic mobility is reduced, and risk factors for increased mortality of the people with COPD. So what is how we are going to do this manual diaphragm release technique? The manual action on the lower rib cage in the cranial direction, that means towards head. The manual compression of the tissue in the area of insertion of the arterial coastal diaphragm fibers lengthen the diaphragm in the insertional zone. The technique improves the exercise capacity and maximal respiratory pressure and kinematics of abdomen and chest wall. Nothing but the coastal margins, you just put your fingers and you stay just near the head side of the patient and just pull it, and the position is supine lying relaxed limbs. Therapist made manual contact with the pisiform and the hypothenar region, and the last 3 fingers bilaterally to the underside of the 7th and 10th rib of the costal cartilage, with the therapist forearm aligned towards the participant shoulders. And during the inspiratory phase, very important, during the inspiratory phase, inspiration phase means diaphragm is flattened phase, the therapist gently pull the point of contact with both the hands in the direction of head, that is head, and slightly laterally. So that's why your hand should be kept along with the alignment of your shoulders, accompanying the elevation of the ribs. And during exhalation, the therapist progressively deepen the contact towards the inner costal margin, maintain the resistance. During exhalation, it has to go actually it has to come up. So that time we are locking the diaphragm. Once you lock the diaphragm during exhalation, when you just release it, what will happen? The maneuver was performed to set 10 deep breath with 1 minute interval between them. So 10 deep breath you have to maintain it, and 1 minute interval breathe them, and evaluate the diaphragm mobility at a high resolution ultrasound of 3.5 megahertz convex transducer used according to protocol suggested by Testa and colleagues. So if you go through, once you take a sonography of diaphragm movement before this manual diaphragm release technique and after manual diaphragm release technique, you can see the huge difference between the two sonography. That is an evidence that shows that actually the diaphragm get activated. The active cycle of breathing. The breathing control 20 to 30 seconds and 3 to 4 deep breath, and again breathe control, and again and just breathe control, and again 3 to 4 deep breath and breathe control, and huffing followed by coughing. This is the active cycle of breathing, ACBT we call it as. We can use this. And postural drainage, suction, manual hyperinflation, and quality life and functional capacity changes. So you can do more activity, that is, you can just, and the physical inactivity again results in more kind of worsening the symptoms. So always keep a movement. So the COPD, the chronic inactivity, exhaustion, hypoxia, hypercapnia, corticosteroids. So what is the beauty of this slide means, in short, I want to say, the COPD is going to kill the health of your skeletal muscles. There is a huge study in BMJ journal, British Medical Journal. There is a beautiful correlation that quadricep strengthening will improve the COPD patients. So cycling will improve the COPD patients. So limb exercise and early mobilization is in ICU. So how much early you are going to mobilize the patient, that much you are going to optimize the oxygen transport and reduce the effect of immobility. And also you can use a pedocycle in ICU if you cannot possible to use the other cycle in COPD patients. And manual technique like chest percussion vibration can be used, and manual technique of compression vibration can be used. And I use KCAT technique of kinesiology taping. I put abdominal taping to enhance the inspiration by assisting the transverse abdominals. So how much I'm going to assist the transverse abdominis, that much I'm going to recruit the lateral breathing. So again, we have to teach activities of daily living, energy conservation methods, how to pace the breathing, and when you are going to start climbing up, you should just expire, and when you are standing still, you should inspire. So kind of energy conservation methods has to be explained. So I think it keeps on like that. We can just work on stationary cycle can be useful, and that's it. I want to complete this thing. So hopefully I'm trying to cover
Yes,
in short period. I would like to cover. You have any question, you can ask me.
yes, class. Anybody wants to ask the question can write in chat box. So chat box you can see on the upright. Anybody has question,
Yeah.
write in the chat box. Any questions can be asked in the chat box.
Otherwise, even you can ask and tell me.
Yes. Uh, so the question
Okay.
has come that about MDRT and VQ mismatch, whether it is increased or decreased. You can see in the chat box.
Okay. Okay. I'll go one by one. First one is somebody asked me to explain MDRT. So manual diaphragmatic release technique. So manual diaphragmatic release technique, what you are going to do means, patient is lying like this, you stay at the head side of the patient, and just what you are going to do means, you are going to just go to the patients towards the rib cages or the costal areas, and you are going to put all these three fingers over here, and you are going to hold with this. And what you are going to do means, the patient is going to do an inhalation and do, see, normally diaphragm during inhalation it go down and exhalation it comes up. So during inhalation phase, you hold it, and what you are going to do means you are going to pull it towards your caudal, that is towards the head of the patient. And during exhalation, just hold it, and don't leave it. And again, inhalation, leave it. So when you are doing inhalation, when you are leaving it, it will just go flatten further fast. So what will happen? It can go for more flattening. So when the more flattening happens, the more inspiration will take place. So what you have to do means take a sonography evidence of the diaphragm at the nearby your cardiac sphincters. You look in sonography, that you can see that the diaphragm is moving very sluggish way. It is not curving, and flattening is not so good. Whereas in case of if you go with the after post diaphragmatic release, if you see, it will just go more flatten and more curve. This shows that the improvement of the diaphragmatic pattern enhancement. And the next question is, in V by Q mismatch, how do we come to know whether it is increased or decreased? It is purely with your ABG analysis, arterial blood gas analysis. You can check it out. Shweta Modi. Sir, in case IE ratio, inspiratory expiratory ratio is reversed, how physiotherapy can improve the normalized ratio? See, here the inspiratory expiratory ratio inspiratory expert ratio is different. Yogi is doing yoga, his inspiratory expert ratio is different. Person who is doing a stair climbing, his inspiratory expert ratio is different. So normally inspiratory expert ratio is decided by the function what you are going to perform. And in case of patient is concerned, inspiratory expert ratio should be maintained by means of your ventilator assistant or non-invasive assistant or breathing control technique. Next, manual technique of diaphragm activation can be do when patients are on BPV mode. What is BPPV? IABP mode, or what we are going to? So I think Deepali Panchal can elaborate that BPV. That is a non-invasive. You are calling about CPAP. You are calling, or BPPV mode. I don't know. Next is, can you brief about taping technique? See, the taping is a basically KCAT technique. What I do means I just recruit the muscles of intra-abdominal muscles, especially TA, the especially the transverse abdominis. So once I recruit the transverse abdominis, automatically what will happen, the core stability function, I already explained about the dual role of diaphragm. So diaphragm start to lose its one more role of posture control. It start to work only for breathing. That is all about. The next is how that I just told, sir, if possible to stimulate diaphragm through electric. See, diaphragm electrical stimulation is still you can do it, but you need a probe which can be put inside. Actually, the outside probes they are doing, but it is not effective, and studies are there, but actually there is no relevance of studies. So can MDRT patient? Yeah, intermittent mechanical ventilation. So if the patient is on intermittent, see, MDRT is to recruit your diaphragm. That's it. You can give on anything, not a problem at all. It has to recruit the diaphragm at any cost. So even the patient is on ventilator also, you can go synchronize along with the breathing of ventilator. You can do it. That is not an issue. And any contraindication? Yeah, if there is a fracture, lower rib fracture of fracture, you cannot do MDRT. And the patient have hypersensitivity, patient have a burns, or the patient have an open wound, you cannot do it. And, anything? Oh, non-invasive mode. Non-invasive mode may BiPAP. So ventilator only, but bi-level ventilation will be done by BiPAP. That is a non-invasive mode. Any other questions?
Anybody else wants to ask? Yes, sir, one question again.
Can we use MDRT for pediatric patients? Actually, it's not my cup of tea. I just not work much in pediatric, but we can do it. But the pressures and all those things, because the respiratory pump mechanism is same, whereas the pressure should be very slow and sustained fashion. And generally, I don't see there is no problem for fractures because they have a green stick of bone. They have more flexibility, nothing to worry about it. But only thing is we have to take care that it's a very small diaphragm. We should be activated in a very beautiful way because for neonate there is no question because diaphragm doesn't work much. Whereas in pediatric we can work definitely with the low pressures. Yeah, relationship between quadriceps strengthening and COPD patient. In KCAT, there is a chain relation is there. Apart from that, the COPD patients specifically they go for wasting of muscles, so that increases the oxygen depth. So when you are going to train your quadriceps muscle, which is going to take more oxygen, it's an aerobic muscle. Oxygen it is going to consume more. So normally when you start to work out with the proper cycling and other things, the quadriceps will start to use less oxygen and work more efficiently. So automatically the diaphragm function, basically your breathing oxygen depth can be controlled. In that way it is helpful. Anything else?
Any further more questions can be asked? So one question.
What must taken while questioning the patient head injury? See, if the patient is having a head injury, first and foremost, don't elevate the foot end because when you elevate the foot end, what will happen is the venous return will increase and cooling, and as well as your cranial pressure will increases. So don't do that mistake, head injury. And in case of respiratory failure, you should look at whether it is a type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Depends on the type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, whether it is a pump level or it is at the alveolar level, perfusion level, or it is because of anything else. So you have to just clarify with the respiratory failure 1, 2, 3, 4. Depends on that you should do position. But in case of head injury, at any cost, don't elevate the lower limb up than the height of the head. That is very important to be taken care. In case of rib fracture patient, I always go for ask the patient to do which rib, whether the first four rib or second four rib or floating rib. You should decide based on that. If it is a first four rib, and normally you can do more diaphragmatic breathing. If suppose the rib is at the last four rib, then you can encourage more thoracic breathing.
Any further questions? Uh, yes, sir. MDRT, so one question.
Yeah. So, V by Q mismatch. How do we come to know whether it is increased or decreased?
That's the MDRT, the last question. MDRT do only work on diaphragm weak condition.
Sir, can you please once again explain MDRT? See, MDRT is nothing but it is a manual diaphragm release technique. Diaphragm cannot be recruited properly. That means the parasympathetic activity has gone. You are in a sympathetic activity, overstressed breathing, where you are using a maximum amount of accessory breathing. So, how to activate the diaphragm? This is a method to activate the diaphragm. Just stand behind the patient at the head end of the patient and just take the fingers pad and just hold your costal bones of 8 ribs and just go along with that and stay for some time and breathe in, breathe out. You just correlate with that. During the breathe in means what happened? Your diaphragm goes down. So hold it. So breathe out. So just you pull it back. During breathe out, you pull it back and stay for some time, and next breathing just leave it. So what will happen? It go further. So what will happen means you are enhancing the flattening of diaphragm because the curve is less. See, this is expiration, this is inspiration, expiration, inspiration. So what I'm doing means during this time I'm holding it, and further it is going this much only. It's not going full flat. Again I'm holding it. So I'm just leaving it suddenly when it come up, and when it come up, I'm suddenly leaving it. It go further down. So what will happen? It get flattened properly. So the inspiratory muscle we are enhancing. So here this is actually cardiac sphincter. So near cardiac sphincter, that is end of xiphisternum, cardiac sphincter, there you have a sonography probe and check it out the before and the pre and after MDRT of your diaphragm. So diaphragm function will improve much better. In V by Q mismatch, how do we know that whether it increased or decreased?
So you can scroll down the message bar. The question is, MDRT do any work in diaphragmatic weak condition?
Okay,
And
okay, okay. I do not know. I'll check it out. It's a lot of questions. Okay. MDRT do work in diaphragm. Yeah, especially it is actually enhancing the function of diaphragm. So you can definitely use it. Clamping of ICD tube is essential by ambulation and patient with pleural effusion. Pleural effusion, clamping of ICD tube is essential while ambulation. Yeah, of course, if it is there, it is well and good. And one important point you should take care of it. Always the ambulation, during ambulation, the ICD bag, the drainage bag should be held below the knee of you. So you take it and walk. Don't hold it like this. Just hold it just below while you're walking. That's very important. And, any specific guidelines while using MDRT for obese patients? See, you can, in case of heavy obese patient, you can use one by one side, then other side you can do it. If you cannot do bilateral, you can do one side and you can do it on other side together.
okay, I guess the questions now become. I guess we are done with the questions, sir. Thank you so much, sir, from GG College of Physiotherapy, especially taking out your time and joining us in your very hectic schedule. We are very grateful to have you with us. Thank you so much, sir.
And thank you so much for JG College as well as the students who have participated. And I think you have some take-home tips for you for your practice. And we have our KCAT workshop, kinetic chain activating technique, as well as cardiopulmonary workshop. If you want any workshop to attend, you can just follow our links and our PhysioTrain pages. And thanks for the wonderful opportunity again for Joycey, as well as Mihir for this wonderful arrangements. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. We'll be looking forward to you now. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.